Okay. Well, I was born in unusual circumstances. I'm black, well, mixed race. My father was black and worked as a doctor in the Royal Hospital and had come over from Ghana. And he had met my mum, and they had who was married with kids, as was he. And but they had an affair, and I was the product of the affair. But I was born in the 1960s, so just when I was a toddler, then I guess the conflict started, and I was living in West Belfast with my white family, but my mum was a very Republican, very nationalist sort of committed Republican, and was supportive of the civil rights struggle. And then when that sort of got superseded by the IRA campaign, and my mum made our house an IRA safe house, and so I grew up. And this very unusual childhood, where I found myself at the intersection, I guess, of a lot of the fault lines in Irish and Belfast society. So, for example, I found myself to be Catholic Catholic and nationalist in a Protestant and Unionist city. I found myself to be black in a very white city, very white country, and of course a white family. There were no other black people around me. And I found myself growing up as an Irish Republican during the middle of a conflict with the British. And so all of the time, all of my life, I feel that I've often been at or had a keen interest in the points of conflict in our society. And sometimes I often feel, I use the word intersection, sometimes it feels like on the edge of some of these different groups that I identify with, So, for example, although I'm a Republican and a nationalist, I'm not always viewed as such by the Republican and nationalist community. I've written a book about my life, and the title of the book is "Where Are You Really From?" And that's the question I've been asked most in life, really, certainly by casual acquaintances and people I'm meeting for the first time. That question, "Where are you really from?" is asked of me by white people, and I view it as a challenge, and the emphasis would be on the word "really," because I was born in Belfast and grew up on the Falls Road in an Irish house, Irish Catholic family house, and Irish Catholic nationalist upbringing. So I had no doubts that I was Irish. How could I be anything else? But from a young age, I have been asked that question, and the word "really" is the challenge, and because that is the other person saying to me, "I don't believe you," or "I doubt the authenticity of your claim to nationality in this country."
Okay, I mean, when you were in jail and ceasefire, you were in prison when the ceasefire was called, and
Yeah.
the prison did have some say, I suppose, in determining that cessation.
Yeah.
But the point I'm making is you were part of a project.
Uh-huh.
It was ultimately about forcing a British withdrawal.
Yeah.
Ending the state of Northern Ireland as it existed in terms of being part of the UK.
Uh-huh.
You're X amount of years on. We're all a lot older, 30 odd years on. It's still in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think when you look back at that?
Hmm.
What was achieved?
I think, yeah, that gets to the heart of the dilemma for Republicans. You have to ask, and more latterly in the last 5-10 years, maybe from the year 2000 or 2010, I would say, I began to really wonder what was going on, and what we had achieved for the price we exacted from the people who we claimed to be representing, and also the price we exacted from the enemy, the opponents, the other side, the British, and so I think you can answer that question by looking maybe at the political career of Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness, and where they started and where they're at now and where they intend to finish. And I suppose for me, I have to justify, or at least to myself, I have to justify the armed struggle. I have to justify it morally and politically, and I have to justify it because I need to explain to myself or reassure myself that it wasn't all a waste of time.
What?
So,
Just about the ordinary people, the people you mix with in the street. If you said to
mm-hmm,
them, okay, let's put up this proposition. Okay, there might be United Ireland, but there won't be a health service. You won't get a free universal health service with all its faults. If you go to a doctor from now on your surgery, whether that's in the Falls Road, Beachmount, whatever, you'll be paying 50 quid before you go in the door. What do you think their
mm-hmm.
reaction would be?
Well, I've asked specifically that question, and I used to always get in the front seats of black taxis, and I would always, because they would hear a lot of chatter about what's going on the road, and I would ask these questions, what do you think about casement? What do you think about austerity? What do you think about this, that, and the other? And a lot of the time, and I was struck by a conversation last year going down, and the guy was saying, 50 quid to go and see your own doctor. I'll not be voting for no United Ireland, And he said, and then he said, sort of side of the mouth through a joke, and he was going, don't be telling anybody I said that. But I've heard that conversation 100 times in the last few years, and I don't know. I suspect that I would imagine, sorry, Henry, I would imagine that there is a big divide, and that for some people it's United Ireland or bust, but for other people, I would imagine if you're a working class mother of 3 living in the Lower Falls or Lower Shankill, you want to know how you're getting to the end of the week and feeding the kids, because there was a report out by a dietitian in the Royal Hospital, as you said, who was speaking about babies and children in West Belfast starving in 2020, and it's still going on now. That was only in November, and that's horrific, And so now and again, I when I watch the debates that are going on about a United Ireland, it is absolutely divorced from anyone's living realities. It is academics and think groups. Policy's what you do, it's not what you say. And if you vote for austerity, you can't claim to be a flipping Marxist, you know what I mean? So I judge them on what, I think this is what annoys them sometimes, but I judge them on what to do and on outcomes, and not on what to say or how well they're doing in the polls.